Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Well, here we are, halfway through November. And I'm just freaking out with the sun and blue skies. Nothing better. Nothing better. Hello. It's, to be more specific, it's November 16, 2023. I should tell you that, so a week from today is Thanksgiving. You know, I'm always talking about the syllable stress being different here than it is in Wisconsin. You know, like here it's red light. And in Wisconsin, it's red light. Here, there's more push on the first syllable. Not necessarily. Yeah, umbrella, not umbrella. I'm trying to figure this out. I was just thinking when I said Thanksgiving, I say Thanksgiving. Again, that second syllable getting the push. Around here, people say Thanksgiving, or Thanksgiving. Nobody says Thanksgiving. So it's either the first or the second syllable, right? Just saying. Speaking of things, boy, here was an indication today where I thought, uh-oh. The brain is not fully functional. Better stand on my head and get some blood into it, because I was going through the newspaper, the New York Times, which is the only one I now have that is I could hold in my hand. And I see a headline that made me, what? It made me, what? And the headline was, well, the first four words were about Adam's turkey ties. Excuse me. So, the first thing I thought, and there was a picture under it. So right away I was aware that the Adams, ADAM apostrophe S, that they were referring to was the mayor of New York City. But that was not enough to stop me from my initial reaction, thinking that it was a story about the fact that New York's mayor, apparently heading into Thanksgiving, wore ties with turkeys on them. That's literally what I first thought. And I suppose it was a millisecond later that I, did the proverbial hit my forehead with my hand saying, "You idiot." Adam's turkey ties. It's there it is again. It's the country of Turkey, where he's got some trouble brewing about money coming from them into his campaign and stuff. So about Adam's turkey ties was a serious story that had nothing whatsoever to do with a piece of cloth that men decreasingly wear around their necks. But again, just as I was telling this story about my initial confusion about what this article was about, it occurred to me, and I've told you the story, about this exact same problem occurring early in my TV career. And I'll do it very quickly for those of you who maybe have, for some reason, haven't heard it. But back in the day, and I'm talking back, like 1975. I'm the weekend anchor at a television station in Madison, Wisconsin. And let me tell you, the weekend anchor is also the weekend producer, the weekend reporter, the weekend. I even shot film. I think I swept the studio after I left. It was to say it was a small staff on the weekends is it was just me and the sports guy and the weather person. So one of the things we did back then was, because we didn't have the technology that now obviously prevalent, any video that might or graphic that might appear over my shoulder as I'm reading a story would actually be a slide that was, there were drawers of slides. And part of putting the show together was thinking, figuring out what stories went in what order, then figuring out, do we have any graphic that could, pop up over my shoulder to make things a little more visually interesting. And in this particular case, there was a story about a horrible earthquake that had happened in Turkey. And so I went to the slide drawer, and sure enough, it said Turkey. And I pulled it out. Obviously, I failed to look at it. And I assumed incorrectly that it was just a slide of the country, because there were a lot of country slides in there, just showing it geographically. And of course, when I'm doing the news about, with a properly somber face about the horrible death toll from the earthquake in Turkey, over my shoulder, people are looking at a roasted Thanksgiving turkey on a platter. So it was the same kind. I have to tell you, this turkey thing seems to be something that I encounter quite often, and causes me a measure of confusion there. Did I say I was going to tell that story quickly? I'm sorry. It is funny. Oh my God. I only wish I could have been on the other end of that one. Sitting at home, watching. That's one of those things, you live for, to see live television errors that are just so obviously unexpected and a true muck up. And I just can't imagine the number of people that were just howling all over southwestern Wisconsin that Saturday evening. Damn. So anyway, delightful story. I shouldn't do all the good ones first and then end in horror, should I? So I'll do this one, and then I'm going to get into some horror, so we can maybe end on a happier note today, which has not been the case recently. I don't know. Have you ever read much James Joyce? I must admit, I have not. All I ever heard was that he was brilliant, that Ulysses was supposedly the greatest book ever written. I never read it. And I consider myself a somewhat, literate in terms of the Western canon. But geez, oh man, something about James Joyce was just fraught, because you just heard how difficult it was to get through one of his books. That's what I heard. So the one that is supposed to be the most difficult is not Ulysses. It's the one he wrote after he wrote Ulysses. And in fact, the one that apparently took him 17 years to write, which is about how long it takes most people to read, it's Finnegans Wake. It is 628 pages of incomprehensibility, apparently. I mean, made up words, sentences that aren't sentences. You don't know whether you're in a dream or reality. He spent 17 years writing it. And he even said that when it was published, that it was the ideal book for someone suffering from insomnia. Although I think it's the opposite. A book that's that difficult would put me to sleep, not be something I'd choose to do when I was incapable of sleep. Anyway, what I'm here to tell you is that some guy in 1995 had the idea of starting a book club that would read Finnegans Wake out loud and slowly and try to comprehend what it was they were reading. So it just occurred to me, it took Joyce 17 years to write it. These guys started reading it in 1995. This is somewhere in California, Venice, California. They started in October of 95. There were about 24 people, believe it or not, who showed up at this beginning of the reading of Finnegans Wake. And so it took them essentially a little over 17 years to read the whole thing because they just finished. Right? So if they started in 95 and it's now 23, oh, wrong. Ha! So much for my math skills. As I said, I'm more toward the humanities end. But it took them even longer than it took Joyce to write the damn thing. So in the course of from 95 to 23, for God's sake, I mean, obviously people in the group died. People moved away. Some people came back. They met on the first Tuesday of every month. And they would read just 1 or 2 pages and discuss what the hell they had just read. Unbelievable. But during the pandemic, what happened is they started meeting more regularly. Then they started reading on Zoom, obviously. And anyway, last month they finally finished Finnegans Wake. And says here that the book club members who saw it through, who spoke with the Washington Post, said that they do not regret a second that they poured into that novel. Why, a 38-year-old member, wait a minute, what was he? How old? I'm not going to get into the math again. Said, discussing the book has been the most fulfilling thing in my life. I think somebody better look in on that guy. I don't know what to say. And then if you ask them, so, okay, you read it, what was it about? They don't have a clue. One of the guys says there's no meaning at all, except that you can, that you can have meaning. What? That doesn't make sense. But that's what somebody else said. The book is a cosmological lens which forces us to really take a deep look at language, relationship, history, and religion. And anyway, so there they go. There's a picture of these guys here sitting around mulling over, the press has been on to this group for some time because it is odd what they were doing and now have done. But so in an article in the Los Angeles Times in 1996, the founder of the group said he hoped to finish maybe a third of the book by 2010. I think they actually went faster than that. So anyway, there's that. So they finished it up with the final sentence, and then, oh, by the way, you know what the final sentence is? Listen to this. Listen to this. There it is. I'm about to do it. Here we go. Away, alone, last, loved, long, the. Did you not? That is not a sentence. But that is the last sentence of Finnegans Wake. Ends in the middle, I guess, of a sentence, and it's incomprehensible. Space, way, space, space, lone, last, loved, long, the. And if you're like saying, what nonsense, I understand that reaction. But on the other hand, it is true that Joyce is thought to be one of the great writers in the English language. And that's what he wrote, amongst a lot of other stuff. So what did this group do when they finished that last thing? They started over. Because they believe that the book's incomprehensible final bizarro sentence is thought, well, to line up with the opening sentence on the first page. So when they finished, damn, they came right back around and started up again. God bless them. Just saying. Oh, man. I do not have the, whatever. I do not have the patience or interest. I'm looking at some of the at some of the comments, and here's one that looks pretty good. This group has my sympathy and empathy. I started reading Ulysses in 1953 as an undergraduate at the University of Chicago. Recently, at age 87, I purchased an audio version and have begun a desperate final assault. Yes, I have skipped ahead often. What a riot. So here's somebody at 87 thinking maybe I could listen to it. And here's somebody else saying, seriously, Finnegans Wake showed signs that Joyce might have been suffering from schizophrenia. His book reminded me of a close relative with the disease who wrote a book in the same incoherent style. Joyce should have thrown it in the fireplace. Anyway, so there you go. Can't imagine. So what's a book you plowed through? because either you had to or because you actually were enjoying it on some level and were just bound and determined to finish it, or you did it just for the bragging rights of it, or you didn't but pretended you did and have always maintained that you read it. Is there a book like that? My book that I did read, that I know a lot of other people did not or could not or just gave up, was Moby Dick. I forgot the damn name for a second. That one about a whale and a guy named Ahab? Yeah, Moby Dick. Because that's not an easy read. And I was just talking to somebody 2 nights ago who said that she was rereading Dickens' Bleak House. Now, and I heard myself saying, oh, that's one of my favorite books. And I think it is, even though I haven't read it in 40 years or 50 years. But I just thought brilliant. And she said, it's hard going. And I thought, I wonder if that would be the case if I were to attempt to reread it. Whatever. There you have it. They finished Finnegans Wake, and damn if they didn't start right on again. Ellen says, I'm a James Joyce fan. Yes, Dubliners. His book of short stories, Dubliners, is wonderful. Yes. Now, that would be something that, yes, I've read some of. It's true. And Ellen says, I took a course in college on Joyce so I could read Ulysses and hope to understand it. I have never thought about attempting Finnegans Wake. God. Well, I would imagine, just assuming that there's a character named Finnegan in it who dies and there's a wake held for him, would be stretching things, right? It could be a guy named Finnegan who wakes one morning, sort of like, Kafka's cockroach guy. I don't know. Okay, I'll stop. It's so much more fun talking about this kind of thing than talking about reality. So we want to say to the fiction writers of America, thank you. Not that they don't base their work in the roiling world we live in, but to read fiction is to immerse yourself in a reality that is at the moment it's fictitious. It's in your head. That's all, and that's a remove that is really nice. Just saying. Oh, I also just want to say 2 housekeeping things. I didn't decide until right before the show that I'm going to take next week off. I'm traveling. I'm doing that ridiculously long car ride to Green Bay. And I just know I'm going to be a very tired person on Monday. And so I'm just thinking no. And then it's a short week to start with. And then I think my brother and sister roll in and it'll just be chaos. I think it'll be hard for me to do it. That's what I decided. So no show next week. And since we're talking about no show, I mean, again, there is some progress being made on keeping me on the air. What's not on the air exactly? The show out there. And I do, though, I would love to have you keep sending me your emails. Every time I say this, I get, maybe 10 more. So if it's like, really, I mean, there was this initial deluge, and now you procrastinating types out there, it's fun to just send it to me, will you? Lynn Cullen Show at gmail.com. Whatever. So let's yesterday, I was wondering about these news articles I was seeing about the horrific death of the hockey player in England, a guy who had played for here in Pittsburgh, is slashed by a skate and dead on arrival. And they said that an arrest had been made. And it said, all the articles said that the person who had been detained had not been identified. And so the article said somebody had been arrested for manslaughter, and the police had not identified him. And I said, well, it happened on video. We know the guy who was wearing the skate that slashed his throat. That name is known. So why wouldn't you just say it? Now, I understand apparently the British authorities couldn't say it because their laws say that if you've simply been taken into custody, if you have not formally been charged, that you are allowed anonymity, which I think is actually a proper thing. If you have, not been tried and in fact not even formally charged, I guess. Anyway, so I'm here to say that was the reason but I don't understand why American media writing it wouldn't say that, although British police are unable to give the name of the man who was detained and questioned and released on bail. Why wouldn't you say it is believed to be Matt Petgrave, who was the guy whose skate slashed Adam Johnson's neck? I don't know. That's the name anyway. That could not be heard. Matt Petgrave. It does say here, there's an explanation. In the UK, arrested suspects usually have the right to privacy unless they are later charged. And once charged, it is legally permissible to name the defendant. This guy was arrested, was interrogated, and was detained, but then released. And he was arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. So it is still not clear whether or not they will charge him. It had been termed a freak accident. What did I read about? And this is something that I so hate the Post-Gazette for taking my local paper away from me. But I did see on the other sources I now employ that the governor has given $4 million to a company, I guess, headquartered here, Astrobotic Technology. And I guess they got a office building on the north side. And then the next line is what blew me away. It said the company, Astrobotic, is expected to launch its first spacecraft to the moon this Christmas Eve. What? I did not know any of this. There's a company here in Pittsburgh that is launching a spacecraft to the moon on Christmas Eve? Well, what if it hits Santa Claus? That seems like a bad night to be whooshing through the air. I'm just saying. No, but it says so that I never even heard of them. I never heard of that, and I feel I'm embarrassed. But so there you have it. It says these guys are renovating currently a big 5-story building on the north side. Started up 16 years ago as a startup here. Now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening here that God knows we don't know about. But a Christmas Eve launch to the moon, why wouldn't I know that? Just saying. There's an Atlantic article that I've read, but it's about self checkout and how it's a failed experiment and how retailers won't acknowledge that because they paid a lot of money to set this crap up, to have you do all the work so they can hire fewer people. And then it turns out they were sold a bill of goods by the people who make these self-checkout things because, they break down. Any of you who've ever used them, there are times when, they drive you nuts and they tell you that you have to stop and wait for a human being to come and help you. And then an exasperated looking, overworked human who used to do checkout now comes over and is somehow able to get you out of whatever quagmire you've gotten yourself into. But it's a pretty long article about how some stores are just saying, fuck this. We thought this was going to work. We thought this was going to save us a ton of money. This is, replacing humans with machines and the labor with your customers. Let your customers do the labor. And I had, when this first started, I had said, I'm not using those things. For one thing, they're taking jobs away from people. And a secondary thing is if I'm going to do the work that the store used to pay somebody to do, then they can friggin' well pay me through discounts. So if I'm checking myself out, I deserve a percentage discount. Pass on whatever they are pocketing by costing people jobs. I'm just saying. And yet, damn, if I didn't start using them. Often because I'd be in a hurry. There were long lines because of short staffing. And so I'd do it. I'd always do it fuming. But as I did it, I realized, what another thing about this is? It makes it very easy to steal. I'm serious. Anyone who hasn't thought that has to be nuts. And if not steal, misrepresent. So let's say you got yourself some Honeycrisp apples. Okay? Those are those incredibly sweet ones that didn't even exist a decade ago. And they're always more expensive. So you put your apples on the thing and it says you can key in what it is, or you can do a product lookup. And if you look under the product lookup, apples, my God, there's, as you know, there's Red Delicious and Granny Smith and Honey Crisp and a Gala, and there's a billion types. So why would you press that it's Honey Crisp? I'm just asking. And I'm here to tell you that a whole lot of people have figured that out. Let's say you got yourself some organic chard and you look that up, and there's organic chard and there's flat out normal, will apparently kill you dead chard, which is less expensive. I'm just saying. So the stores are not talking about how much they're losing in that way by customers taking their discount as they check out. But apparently Walmart has completely started just getting rid of these things. They backed out. Not just because of the thievery aspect of it, but also because they're finding that it's not saving them much of anything. And they've had to hire people to oversee the muck-ups at their self-help checkout. Just saying, if any innovation deserves to die, that's one I will heartily applaud. Just saying. One of the things, though, they say that human nature, the reason some people love it, is because they feel they're in control. Anybody who ever feels they're in control is obviously delusional. But the feeling you get when you're doing the work is that you are in control. And the sense that most people have is that they use it because it's quicker. They're wrong. But that is the feeling they get. Now, hey, I'm glad about, Xi and Biden meeting. And it seems to me that, they didn't punch each other, and they talked, and all that's good. And there's been some progress. Our militaries had stopped talking to each other. Now they're going to start Zoom communication, which is always helpful. And boy, if this fentanyl thing they agreed on, if that really has some substance, that would be great. Because the stuff that is used to make this deadly drug, which is made in Mexico generally, the stuff to make it comes out of China. And so they have apparently agreed to do a little bit more, just try to, stop sending all those chemicals. So I don't know. You can bet they didn't agree on much, but talking is always better than the alternative. So I do want to say that. And a guy who I've started reading on Substack, who I really, really appreciate his voice, his wisdom, his having been there, is Dan Rather. He has aged really well. He's sharp as a tack, and he's a good writer. And I think his perspective is a helpful one, and one that I trust. And today I happened to read something he had written about how, war is what makes the news. War, heaven knows, is visual. War is emotional. War sells newspapers and attracts eyeballs and is everything that a commercialized media revels in. Diplomacy, on the other hand, diplomacy happens in the shadows. And because we don't pay attention to it, or because we don't have the ability to know what is going on, diplomacy works in the dark, where enemies can talk but not have to, answer reporters' pesky questions. It is something that is done that often helps end wars and or prevent wars, and as such is an extraordinarily underappreciated skill. And to see the amount of diplomacy surrounding this Gaza-Israel thing is amazing, although we don't know. And what Rather says, and I just think it's good to keep in mind that diplomacy can seem like a lack of action to us who want action, want stuff to happen. It can seem like nothing's happening. But obviously, diplomacy requires compromise. And what is revealed to us, the public, is usually only a sliver of what is actually taking place behind those closed doors. And Rather reminds us this: we do not know what is being said right now between Biden, Blinken, and the leaders of Israel and the Arab states. We do not know what is being discussed with our allies and relayed to our foes. We don't know all that is taking place in and around Ukraine either. And he said that one of the joys of covering the world when he was a working journalist is often meeting these quiet guys who were involved in trying to make the world less violent and safer, the diplomats. He said, and they are often an incredibly impressive bunch of people. Just saying that there is that goes on that gets none of our, or very little of our attention. And that's how they want it, because that's how they can make progress. I have a caller. Hello.
Good morning, my friend.
Hi.
Since you started off with literature, do you mind if I go back there for a second?
Not a bit.
Okay. I have to assume you've probably listened at some point to This American Life with Ira Glass's program on NPR. Mm-hmm. So about 10 years ago, if not more by now, one of their pieces featured an actor who read a fictional dialogue between Gregor Samsa, who was the main character in Kafka's Metamorphosis,
right,
and Dr. Seuss. And the
okay, so just to be clear, this is a guy who wakes up as a cockroach.
Correct.
Okay. And so this guy and Dr. Seuss have a. Go ahead.
He writes a letter to Dr. Seuss looking for a cure. And I'm no literati, so I'm actually looking at this as we speak. But it's interesting. This says Dr. Seuss started writing poetry for children by chance. Returning from Europe by boat in 1936, he amused himself by putting together a nonsense poem to the rhythm of the ship's engine.
Wow.
And later, he drew pictures to illustrate the rhyme, and this is known as anapestic tetrameter, is the style that Seuss writes in. If you want to laugh and perhaps cry at this, the actor's portrayal of this, because it's the same voice, and he's speaking as Samsa and Dr. Seuss as they exchange this series of letters. And at the end, of course, Samsa kills himself because Dr. Seuss can offer him no cure. And he actually, I mean, that in the book, Samsa kills himself as well. He dies by suicide. But it is just one of them. It's something that I go back to every couple of years because it is just one of the most amazing pieces of creative writing and performance that I've ever heard. And you can find the actor's name on YouTube or whatever if you want to find it. But if you're looking for something to make you laugh and smile and cry maybe when you're on vacation, check out just Google, This American Life and put in Dr. Seuss Kafka or something like that, and you'll bring it up. It's remarkable.
I'm noting it right now because on that long car trip, This American Life. Okay, thank you for that.
Hey, and Lynn, just one more quick thing. When you're asking about people emailing you, are you asking for new people that have not emailed you before?
No. I'm asking for even the people who've been around forever because I don't keep those emails. So
okay. So it could be
everybody.
You're just asking for, here I am, whatever.
Just send me. Here's my email. Yeah, here's my email. Okay. Just that's all you have to do. And because I got a growing list, but it'd be easier for me and for many of you if I show up at another place to say, here's where I'll be. Right. So.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you. You and your family have a blessed Thanksgiving. Okay.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Now I'm looking at my. Okay, I'm quickly going to do 2 quick horror stories, and then end on good stuff. Okay, the 2 horror stories are just again to center people with. I remember once learning that one of the reasons Israel gets so much coverage is that all the major international news outlets have permanent offices there. They do not have permanent offices in most countries. And as news operations shrunk, they closed a whole bunch more, but not the ones in Israel. The fact that there is that sort of epicenter of international media that are there means that anything that happens there gets outsized coverage. Now you can ask, well, why did they decide to be there? Well, obviously it's a roiling kind of a place. I say roiling one more, tell me to stop. So I find that that's, interesting. If a war breaks out somewhere where there's not that kind of presence, it takes some time for most news organizations to put any kind of major, operation on the ground. But in Israel, man, that is brick and mortar, and it's there, solid, and forever. And so there's a lot of reporters over there sitting around with nothing to do, except sometimes, make a lot of what wouldn't even be reported on anywhere else for lack of there being any reporters around to even know about it. So that is one thing I want to point out. The other thing is I keep saying that if these students, these impassioned students, so appalled by the brutality of Israel, I sure wish they would explain to me why, for instance, again, reading the paper today, there is such horror going on right now in Sudan. I mean, incredible. There are over 5 million Sudanese people who have been displaced recently, running for their lives from the brutality unleashed upon them. But this is Muslim on Muslim violence. People of color on people of color violence. And it doesn't float the boats of the kids in the colleges. Because all the parties here, by their very definition, are oppressed. So I guess they can't be appalled by the level of horror that may be going on. For instance, in Sudan, in Darfur, you're not seeing any people in the streets. You don't see media drawing attention to it and to the poor people there. Here's somebody who's with the sheer number, this is quoted in the New York Times today, the sheer number of deaths, the scale of the devastation in Darfur and the lack of attention show how the international system is failing in front of our eyes. Mm-hmm. Well, you can thank all those. So the Palestinian PR machine has sucked all the air, I guess, out of the media's room and capacity to cover anything but. And I just like to say to those poor people in Sudan, get yourself a better marketer. Do PR like the Palestinians. Maybe engage in some terrorism. It seems to work for them. The Sudanese American Physicians Association said he had seen unbelievable things. He says people are dying like insects. And what do you know about that? What about those poor people? Or what is it about the Palestinians? Let me think. Oh, yeah. It's those Jews who are the bad guys. That'd explain it. That would explain it. And I think that's a big part of it, without a doubt. Hey, came upon this, and this is something. This war, too, is tearing apart a lot of old lefties from the new crew. Let me just, for instance, the Democratic Socialists of America, if you look at the people who founded that group, Irving Howe, Cornel West, David Dinkins, Michael Harrington was he was a writer that I read quite a bit of, and an activist. And it was his Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee that sort of was the precursor to the Democratic Socialists of America. And here's what he said in 1975. This was the American left 1975. Quote, I support Israel as an internationalist. Israel is a democratic country whose people are passionately defending its self-determination. He went on to say that the United Nations resolution saying that Zionism equates to racism is a preposterous charge and drains the concept of racism of any serious meaning. Which just goes to show you that guy, there's a lot of the founders of this group would not be welcome in what has become of it and its worldview. And I think that is also interesting to note. All righty, here. Oh, also, France has brought charges of crimes against humanity against the Syrian President Assad, who also wiped out, using poison gas and other horrors, tens of thousands of his own people in, the last 10 years or so. And that was known. He had Russians' help too. And where were the lefties on that one? But I guess, oh, right, it's Arab on Arab, POC on POC, so they don't know. They get paralyzed. All right, I am looking at a picture of some teenagers in a swimming pool. God, they're beautiful. And there's a quote from one, it is so normal to be together. It's weird even talking about it. And the it she refers to is what is going on in Gaza and Israel. Because these beautiful teenagers are part of a swim club at the YMCA in Jerusalem. And they are Jewish kids and Palestinian kids, and they get together and have forever 6 afternoons a week to train for 2 hours. They're some of Israel's best. And they have strong friendships. Obviously, it says since October 6th, this has been something that has created some tension. And the article goes on to talk about how the kids themselves are working through that tension. The coach said, look at these kids. It's impossible to tell who's a Jew, who's an Arab. There are no symbols that identify them. I mean, they're almost naked. They're just beautiful young people. And one of the Palestinians on the team said, this is my second family. If we have a problem, we fix it like a team. So there's something so wonderful about that. And the coach saying you can't tell them apart is true, which again leads this bullshit from the left that Israel is white and Palestinians are people of color. In that swimming pool, the coach defies anyone to point out who's white and who's a person of color, because they all look the same. Strange kind of racism at work there. Strange. Oh, and quickly, because we're running out of time. Quickly, this other thing. All right, this whole story. School district in Texas decides to put on a musical, and they decide on Oklahoma, which is as old chestnut as you can get. And damn if the superintendent doesn't go berserk and says that it was profane and had sexual content. This is from 1943. It offends the 2023 folks. So anyway, the real reason was, I guess one of the leading roles was a transgender kid. Was a transgender kid, and there were also some role shifting going on with girls playing boys' roles, whatever, just to because there's more girls wanting to be in it. All hell broke loose. It's a very conservative town, very conservative town, and damn, something unusual happened. I just want to say. For somehow the community rose up and said, this is nuts. Our kids were so excited about doing this. This is nuts. And so the school board announced a special meeting to consider possible action. And the community showed up. The parents of the transgender kid were steeled for some horror that they were going to. And they arrived in their car and saw this huge crowd of their own community on their side. And the mother said she just broke down in tears in the car. All 7 school board members, after listening to the people who showed up, voted in favor of Oklahoma going forward with the cast that had been cast. And they even said, we want to apologize to our students, parents, our community regarding the circumstances that they have had to go through. Sherman, Texas. That's my good news. Hey guys, so I won't talk to you till after Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful time with your friends and family, and I don't know what else to say. I'll miss you, and I'll see you soon, and God knows what will happen in the interim. God, toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.